This video isn't sponsored by Arby's, but cue the music anyway, because today we have the meats. And today you will be meeting the interior defensive line class for the 2026 NFL Draft. I always like to preface these videos by talking about how this draft compares to previous years. Is it a good year? Is it a bad year for this position group? And I would say this is an average interior defensive line class. It's a solid group. It just doesn't have your bona fide top 20 talent that everybody's going to be buzzing about. But I will say I do have 6 players here that made my top 50. And if you're picking in that 20 to 50 range, it is a really good year to need interior defensive linemen. So there's going to be some very fun players to talk about here today that I think will be really good NFL players, if not superstars, if everything goes right. And as we get started here, by popular demand from my last position rankings video, the running backs group, a lot of people suggested that I stick with how we did that video and start with my number 1 ranked player and go down towards number 10. So for today's video, we're going to stick with that process and see how things go, which means we're going to be kicking things off here with my number 1 ranked interior defensive lineman for the 2026 NFL Draft. And full disclosure, with my grading system, I do have a full-out tie for the number 1 spot here between 2 players. And they're 2 incredibly different players, but I do see these guys in the exact same range of where I would draft them, late first, early second round. But as you'll see here, very different stylistically. So depending on what you're looking for your team, one of these is going to make more sense than the other. But because I'm not a coward, I will start and give the nod to my number 1 defensive tackle, or my number 1A defensive tackle here. And we're going to start with Peter Woods out of Clemson. And if you made this ranking back in August, before the season started, everyone would be like, well, yeah, of course you have Peter Woods as your number 1 defensive tackle. This year, it's a little bit more murky. Now, a lot of people do still have him this high, just like myself here. But needless to say, it's been a disappointing year for Peter Woods, who was in a lot of those way too early top 5 mock drafts heading into the year. And this year definitely did not go that way. Now, he still might find himself going in the first round, but there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was a bad year. I mean, he had just 14 pressures all season long on 363 pass rushing snaps. He was effectively a non-factor in doing the thing that you hope he does best at the next level, and that is to be a pass rusher and to get after the quarterback. And I would say as a run defender, he was solid, but certainly inconsistent as you got through the tape. So you're definitely going to get that sort of residue of disappointment. Anytime someone has big expectations and they don't live up to it, you're going to get a little bit of a negative rap about you. And Peter Woods has faced that throughout this draft process. But he also has been very much tagged as, I think, a bit of a boomer bust type of prospect. And I really don't disagree with that. But anytime you talk about a boomer bust prospect, usually it's either, well, his technique is just kind of bad and he's just not a very good football player when you watch him, or you're going to have like injury or off-field stuff that makes them a little bit more boom or bust. And with Peter Woods, he's a little bit more of an enigma, to be honest, because when you watch his tape, he's technically pretty good. I mean, there's certainly some stuff that he needs to improve on that we will talk about here. But, I mean, man, there's a lot more reps than not where he plays the run with good pad level and proper stack technique, where he lands those hands inside and he extends his arms and he peeks and he can play the run with the typical technique that you ask these guys to play it with. And as a pass rusher, man, like, he's got a full bag of pass rush moves. He has the most diverse pass rushing skill set in this draft class. It's a big reason why he lands as my number 1 defensive tackle. He can bull rush you. He can beat you quickly with a swim move. He's got a cross chop. He has Euro steps that kind of force guys to step in one direction, then he'll attack the opposite half man and slip past you. He'll even mix in a push, pull, rip, like really taking command of his block. You can see every different way that you could ask a defensive tackle to win with as a pass rusher in Peter Woods' tape. The main question here is, why the hell did it not work more often? how did he possibly end the year with just 14 pressures and was just such a lack of an impact for this Clemson defense? And I love that term. It's really just an enigma that you have to kind of dive in and figure out why. For me, there's two reasons why he was not productive in this final year as a pass rusher. Number one, the more and more you watch him, the more you realize, yes, he's able to break out this massive bag of pass rush moves, but the effectiveness of those moves, the efficiency in which he wins with them, just isn't good enough yet. The actual moves themselves aren't fully developed. The bag is wide and expanded, but the individual moves need refinement. And I also think when you look at the shorter arm length for him, being 31.25 inches, it does reduce his margin for error. And you add on top of that I just don't think he's overall a strong enough player. There is strength in his profile, like with those shorter arms, it's pretty common. If you have 31 or 32 inch arms and you're an NFL athlete, like it's a lot easier to fill those arms out. So I do think he has strength in his arms, but in his core, in his lower half especially, his play strength profile is just very average. And I do think that shows up in his ability to kind of displace his opponent with whatever move he's doing, which is obviously going to help you get after the quarterback, whether it is especially with the bull rush, where I think he does have that initial knockback, but he doesn't have the leg drive to consistently push guys off of his spot. But whether he's attempting that push-pull swim or the cross chop, he's not quite strong enough to move these guys out of the way. Even if in some of these kind of finesse-style pass rush moves, it's more about athleticism and technique, you still need a little bit of displacement to move guys off of their spot, and I think he's missing that. And some of that does come with some of the placement of his hands with these moves, that it's harder when he's got shorter arms. He's just got to be a little bit more precise with the timing and placement of some of these different moves that he does try. And then the other thing that doesn't really have anything to do with Peter Woods that is pretty relevant with why he wasn't as productive, and this really bodes in his favor for why you might want to take a leap of faith with Peter Woods, and that's that opponents knew heading into the Clemson week that they had 2 first-round defensive linemen. And when you watch the tape on Clemson, it's frustrating for Peter Woods' sake. It applies to TJ Parker. And just as a viewer trying to get information about these players, the amount of screens and third down runs and just quick passes and the amount of times that these teams just didn't want anything to do with third and pass situations against this defense, it was more noteworthy watching these guys than a lot of players I can really remember. And shout out to Weekly Insider on Twitter. As I was engaging with some of you guys in the community with this conversation, I asked the question of, like, I wonder if the stats back that up. And Weekly Insider looked it up, and sure enough, every single quarterback that they faced was below or well below their average time to throw from the season. So there is some statistical backing to that, but he just didn't have a lot of true opportunities to produce, but also to continue to refine these moves and start to stem moves together and really develop that pass rushing plan here in just his 3rd season. So there really is an exciting foundation with a guy that is as athletic as some linebackers in this draft class in terms of agility and get off and change of direction and bend. There's elements of the power coming together. There's elements of good run defense, but it's just a lack of consistency and overall production that leaves a lot of doubt on what he's going to be in the league. I do want to talk a little bit more about his run defense because we've been pretty focused on who he is as a pass rusher. Now, I'll be honest, when you draft kind of an undersized, shorter arm, athletic defensive tackle, the point is you want him to be a pass rush first player, but you want him to be a 3-down player as well if you're going to spend a first-round pick on the guy especially. And in terms of how good he is against the run, surprise, surprise, he's just inconsistent. We've alluded to it, but there's those highs. Where he really struggles is he can get knocked back with his anchor. He is a lighter defensive tackle, so especially as he goes to the next level, combo blocks, down blocks, some of these mauling 330-pound guards, they're going to take him out of his gap. And I don't know if that's going to improve tremendously either. But what I think he can get a lot better at is just the overall consistency to his approach. I think he knows he's a great athlete and he tries to out-athlete a lot of these offensive linemen against the run. And that can lead to splash plays, but it also can lead to him walking himself out of his gap, outrunning his gap, exposing cutback lanes that NFL running backs, NFL linemen are going to be even better at, taking advantage of some of those technical shortcomings. So there is Peter Woods. I like him at the end of the first round. If you can get him at the top of the second round, that's a hell of a talented project to bring in. But I do tend to agree with this sort of consensus opinion that, look, there was a reason he was hyped up heading into the year as a way too early top 5 mock draft kind of guy, that the upside is there for him to be like a true number 1 defensive tackle. My high-end comp is Nnamdi Madubuike. But I just think the chances that he's more of just a rotational pass rusher, my low-end comp being Adam Butler, who's a good NFL player, but not someone you would go back and spend a top 20 draft pick on. I think the chances of that happening are high enough that I'm not spending that kind of key top 20 draft pick on him. But as your kind of true first rounders start to trickle out, definitely, mid-20s, I'm cool with gambling on a Peter Woods. But that takes me to my other number 1 defensive tackle, my 1B or number 2 DT, however you want to look at it. Very different player here, but it is actually Christian Miller out of Georgia, who I did find myself a decent bit higher on. I think most people see him as a early to mid second round guy. Honestly, if I'm at the end of the first round, you could sell me on Christian Miller. I think you could sell me on Christian Miller. I think he's a really high floor player with the upside to maybe be like a number 1 defensive tackle, especially if some of the pass rushing stuff can tick up as he projects to the next level. But I do want to start with his run defense and his just kind of physical profile. I mean, no Peter Woods concerns here with Christian Miller. He's like the perfect size to defend the run. He's 6'3", 320 pounds. He's got much better arm length, 33-inch arms, which isn't spectacular, but definitely clears that threshold and doesn't give him that same like reduced margin for error that Peter Woods is going to have in terms of sticking his hands inside and commanding his block. Things will come easier for someone like Christian Miller, especially in the run game. And he certainly looks the part of an NFL defensive tackle in that way. But he backs it up with really good technique and a little bit of a kind of a mean streak and an it factor against the run that you grow to appreciate more and more as you watch him play. I think that's really important too, to want to defend the run. And clearly Christian Miller has that as a baseline. But, it's 6'3.5" inches tall. I think defensive tackles can kind of go one way or the other in terms of letting their pads come up too high and losing that natural leverage, or being good at keeping their pads down and helping their anchor and winning that natural leverage. And I think Christian Miller definitely understands the value of keeping those pads down, getting, low man wins up and under a guy's chin. And then he has extremely strong, accurate, consistent hands that play with great technique, that classic just boom, stack, peek, shed, dominate the run mentality. And then he's got enough athleticism as well to kind of have a little bit more range as a run defender. If a guy is maybe a half gap away, he's got enough acceleration and agility to slide over, dive after him, make a play against the run. There's going to be some bigger nose tackles that we talk about today that are really good at holding their own and getting off blocks, but maybe don't have the playmaking range of a Christian Miller against the run, and you certainly see that show up on tape with him. He can penetrate. It's just not his style. It's not what Georgia was asked to do. He has a swim move, especially if he catches you leaning into him. He'll break out that slippery little swim move where he can get into the backfield quickly and, again, produce as a run defender, get those TFLs and run stops. But that's more something he might break out as a reaction, again, if he catches you leaning. It's not what he's seeking out to do, and honestly, that's a good thing because it's hard to find guys that just play that stout, stonewalled run defense that can command a gap in the way that Christian Miller can. So he's clearly got the traits and has been coached well at Georgia to defend the run. And then I actually think there's some good stuff there as a pass rusher. This Georgia system can be really hit or miss for a lot of different defensive linemen, and I think in Christian Miller's case, he just wasn't given a ton of those opportunities to truly pin his ears back and get after the quarterback to show us that he can produce at a high level, but beyond that, to develop the tools and the pass rush approach to be a more complete pass rusher. So I think he's a little bit more behind the 8-ball coming out of that Georgia program in terms of his completeness as a pass rusher, but it's all in there. Like I said, he's a good enough athlete. There's no question about the play strength or the size, and you can see him winning in a different variety of ways. The bull rush is beautiful when it does connect. I think a lot of times Georgia was either taking him off the field on third downs or asking him to be more of a looper or a contain rusher. So he didn't get a ton of opportunities to truly put it all together. But if you can get a more consistent first step and more consistent hand placement, I think the bull rush can be his bread and butter, and he can really compress the pocket and at worst be a quality number 2 pass rusher for you while maybe being your best run defender for earlier downs. But that's just kind of a starting point and a building block. Like, he has that swim move that he uses against the run. You can see him winning with that same swim move as a pass rusher as well. And he'll break out rips as well, where he's got just enough kind of speed, acceleration, and good enough bend to win around, especially when they used him as a looper. You could see, like, yeah, he's a good athlete for such a big guy. So the pass rush production wasn't necessarily there in college, but I definitely project it with the right coaching and opportunities to come along much more. So I was a big fan of Christian Miller. A lot of our upcoming players are very run defense oriented players. I thought Christian Miller's run defense was better. I thought Christian Miller's run defense was about as good or even better than some of these other guys that other people might rank above Christian Miller. But I think the upside to be more of a 3-down complete player for you is much better. So I actually, end of first round, certainly early second round, really do believe in Christian Miller. I see a best case scenario of someone like Kenny Clark for the Green Bay Packers, those Packers who love to draft Georgia defensive players and need a defensive tackle to replace Kenny Clark just might be praying that Christian Miller can get to them at 52. But by my own ranking, that would be a little bit of a surprise. But I guess we'll see for Packers Nation out there. But there's my 1B defensive tackle, Christian Miller. I do want to ask you guys, if you are enjoying the breakdowns here today, please do take a second to hit that like button. It really does show your support. It pushes this video out to other NFL draft fans just like you. Of course, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of my positional rankings. I'll be live here for every pick of the draft, giving my live reactions and analysis. We're going to be doing mock drafts leading up to it, you name it. So make sure you're subscribed. And then a couple other plugs here. I want to remind you that you can get access to my full draft guide that has my full write-ups, rankings, evaluations on every player I've watched for the 2026 draft. You can get that on my Patreon. It's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Right now I've watched 21 defensive tackles. So if there's some guys that don't make the list here today that you want to know my thoughts, my individual grades like you're seeing on the screen here, the pro comps, you name it, you can get all of that over on my Patreon. We're going to be doing 7-round mock drafts for all 8 divisions in the weeks leading up to the draft as well. So you can get all of the great exclusive content via the draft package on my Patreon. And one last thing, I want to remind you, I have a merchandise store. If you enjoy the draft season, TFG hoodie, or you want to get some other TFG stuff and rep it out in the wild, support the channel in the process. It's thatfranchisestore.com. And that's what we got for plugs here today. Let's move forward to my number 3 defensive tackle. And Caleb Banks here does actually share the same overall grade with the player that's going to end up my number 4 defensive tackle. But this is a little bit more of a unique situation where, compared to the tie we had for number 1, in that if not for the very scary concerns about his foot and his long-term durability with that foot, Caleb Banks would be my number 1 defensive tackle. He got knocked down because of the injury concerns, and it just happened to land at the same grade as the guy we're going to have at number 4. And we do have to start there with Banks. I mean, I would not be the least bit surprised if he falls into the second round because he has re-aggravated the foot that he headed into his final year at Florida with a foot injury, missed the first couple games, went back out there, tried to play through it, had to come out for the majority of the season, battled back, tried to get back out there late, wasn't the same. And then the pre-draft process for him has been, shrouded by this re-injury of his foot. And I do think too, I'm not a doctor, maybe someone in the comments can enlighten us here, but just in being a longtime sports fan, it does feel like the guys that would qualify as like physical freaks, a lot of these guys do seem to deal with some more kind of durability concerns with their bones. Just a lot of, mass and momentum and added pressure getting put on the human body that maybe it wasn't built to endure. But regardless of if that's true or not, Caleb Banks clearly has concerns about if his foot and his feet can stay healthy. So you have to start there with Caleb Banks. But if you can clear through that and you want to gamble on that, man, Caleb Banks is one of my favorite players in this draft, full stop. And I just dove into the film before I even really knew about the foot injury, and certainly before I saw it pop back up. And God, I was so ready to have this as a top 10 player, a total my guy. And I mean, seriously, just an incredibly high upside defensive tackle that I'm not afraid to say his high-end pro comp is like shades of Chris Jones. The way he's able to just manhandle and overwhelm and out-athlete SEC offensive linemen blew me away. And he really has that same pass rushing style that like Chris Jones has, where, he can get off the ball, he can keep his pads down as much as he can for a bigger guy, and use those long arms, 35-inch arms for Caleb Banks, and he can get in your pads and beat you with a bull rush. But once he knows that he's placed that fear of God in you, that he can outpower you, just bowl over you, he's quick enough to just swim past you. He's got that club and go move where he just has a powerful knockback punch, displaces you, and can just run right past you. I mean, seriously, the ways he wins, the way he moves, his physical profile, very similar to Chris Jones, except Caleb Banks is actually 15 pounds heavier. Now, we got a long way to go until we see if he can stay healthy and if he can translate his game against the NFL in the way that Chris Jones has. But with that, there's no doubt in my mind that Caleb Banks is the highest upside player that we're going to talk about here today. And I think another thing you have to mention with him is his contact balance. Yes, he can get behind his pads and get a little bit lower and beat you with the bull rush, but a lot of his pass rush wins do come with kind of that same upright pass rush style that someone like Chris Jones, or I talked about this same thing with Deone Walker last year, who his skill set ended up translating to the NFL as a rookie. But if you're going to play upright as a pass rusher, you're going to be exposed to a lot of jabs and punches into your chest. You have to have really good natural contact balance to absorb those strikes, and just balance overall in your legs, agility to keep your feet running and stay balanced and play through those with that swim move or with that club move. He's got that same thing that guys like Chris Jones and Deone Walker have. So that's a huge plus, because you do see guys that are 6'5" and athletic and they try to win like this, but the second a guy throws a good punch into that tall chest, they get knocked back. You don't really move Caleb Banks like that. And I wanted to kind of use that as a transition from his pass rushing into his run defense, because it's relevant with how he plays as a run defender. He plays with that same style where he doesn't really try to dip below you, anchor with low man wins mentality with your classic stack peak shed ability. There's some moments where he can do that, but he really does just try to out-athlete offensive lines against the run, and that comes with its pros and cons. I mentioned that you don't really move Caleb Banks as a pass rusher when he's kind of tall and standing up and trying to out-athlete you. Well, that's because the linemen are going backwards in their pass sets, It's different in the run game where these linemen have their full, weight and mass behind them. You can certainly drive Caleb Banks backwards. A lot of people are going to look at his size and say that's a nose tackle. No, you don't want to play him as a nose tackle. You want him as a penetrating 3 technique with a bunch of other guys around him that play with much more sound gap control and disciplined run defense. And he also just hasn't played a ton of football, so I think his understanding of run concepts and finding the ball, some of the diagnostics and knowing when he should probably play with a little bit more discipline and hold his gap, there's a lot more work to do, I think, with his run defense kind of overall understanding and technique. But where I will give him credit is that kind of like you might do with a 6'1", 285-pound 4-eye, he can split into the backfield and disrupt the run where you're hoping other guys can clean up for you. That swim move, his athleticism, his ability to just kind of run upfield and use that contact balance where guys are only getting half of them and he's able to kind of pull through and get into the backfield. And he misses a lot of tackles because he's kind of out of position when he does that. But there's so many plays against the run where they are TFLs or there's opportunities that other guys didn't capitalize on. But he's slowing down the run game and creating opportunities for everybody else. He can absolutely do that for you. So he's not useless as a run defender. You just probably don't want to stick him in as a one tech and have him taking on combo blocks all day long. And honestly, the Chiefs do the exact same thing with Chris Jones because he plays with a very similar style. That pro comp just keeps coming back and back. It's hefty praise, but in terms of the traits and the play style and the potential, it is all there. So that's why when Caleb Banks eventually gets drafted, whether it's the end of the first or early second, maybe even like early third with these injury concerns, if the doctors are just like, we don't think he can stay healthy, Caleb Banks is going to be one of those players that you're sitting around watching the draft with your friends and Caleb Banks comes off the board, or you're watching the live stream on the channel, Caleb Banks comes off the board. It's going to be that's a fun pick with a ton of upside. He might just never stay healthy, and that doesn't just obviously take him off the field, but if he can't practice and get better at some of his deficiencies and continue to refine his pass rushing stuff, he might never develop into the player that he could be, even if he does play a decent amount of games. So there's the obvious risk there, but man, is he a fun player. And I do just want to wrap up with this. I think a lot of people view Caleb Banks as a raw boomer bust type of player. I think his game's going to translate, especially the pass rushing stuff, but I think as a penetrator in the run game too, even though he hasn't played a ton of football and the injuries are a big concern, it reminds me a lot of like when Amarius Mims came out of Georgia. It's like he just hasn't played a ton, but the tape's actually really good against SEC competition. He knows what he's doing. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's more of an early impact player than he often gets credit for. But there's Caleb Banks. And then let's go to my number 4, defensive tackle, who, again, comes in with the same grade, but certainly not the same type of upside as someone like Caleb Banks, and a very different style of player as well here in Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. And this is where we get into one of those players we talked about earlier who is really there to stop the run and maybe give you a little bit of something as a pass rusher, but ideally Lee Hunter's probably never going to be anything better than your 4th best pass rushing defensive lineman on your team, and maybe ideally he's even lower in the pecking order than that, but we can kind of get the pass rushing stuff out of the way with Lee Hunter. Like, he has a big, strong frame, and he can steadily compress the pocket enough. It's about all you're getting from him as a pass rusher, but holy shit, is this guy strong, man. I wrote down that you might go a draft or 2 before you find a player with the raw play strength of Lee Hunter, especially in his upper body. I mean, between his arms and his core and his chest, this dude moves large 300-pound people unlike, humans are supposed to be able to do. Like, he has crazy play strength, and because he's so strong from his waist up, he's kind of built this unique frame and style. He's actually a little bit thinner in his lower half. I think his quads are very filled out, and he has enough kind of sand in his pants to not get moved off the ball against the run. But you will notice his ankles are very thin, and it's kind of a benefit to him because he doesn't really need any more strength from his calves and down to his feet. And that actually allows him to be lighter on his feet, which helps him get off blocks and deploy a little bit of a swim move, especially as a run defender, where you do need just like a baseline amount of agility to just pick up your feet and kind of sidestep guys. That doesn't really show up as much as a pass rusher. Again, the pass rush, it's very much, I'm leaning into you, I'm trying to drive you backwards. And a lot of times they just took Lee Hunter off the field as a pass rusher. But the fact that he has the ability to dominate in a traditional sense as a run defender, annihilate guys off the line, anchor against the run, strong arms to shed, good overall play recognition and gap discipline. The fact that he has that, and the second he feels you kind of leaning into you a little bit, he can slip off of you and have enough kind of agility to finish plays in the run game and get running backs to the ground. That's what was really special about like Vince Wilfork. And I don't think it's crazy to throw that name into the conversation with Lee Hunter. Now, my high-end pro comp is DJ Reader, who was one of the better nose tackles in the NFL for about a 5-year run. I think Lee Hunter can be in the mix for that description. I mean, there's not that many great nose tackles in the NFL. But I don't think you need to overcomplicate it with Lee Hunter. I mean, this dude's ability to come off the ball and just lean into you in the run game and command a block to take on double teams, to get you to third down, which benefited Texas Tech, of course, with Romello Height and obviously David Bailey. Those guys don't have the years that they have without Lee Hunter getting that defense into those true pass rush situations. So if you need pass rush help, don't draft Lee Hunter. If you have other pass rushers that you just want to put into more advantageous situations and end up with more 3rd and 8s instead of 3rd and 4s, draft Lee Hunter. And for me, he is worth a late first, probably more of an early second, but there are a couple of teams that he does make sense for. Like I've mocked him to the Houston Texans before, because again, it's like, let's just get more, elite situations for Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter to just pin their ears back. So if you're like me and you enjoy a good run defending nose tackle, Lee Hunter is a really fun and in many ways unique watch because of what we talked about with kind of having the lighter feet to do a little bit more as a playmaking run defender and not just hold the fort, eat up double teams type, which he can also do. And then that takes me to a very similar type of player that I just don't think has quite the range and playmaking ability that we described with Lee Hunter, and that's Caden McDonald out of Ohio State. And you will notice the draft value has changed. My top 4 guys all had 1st to 2nd round grades, so all guys I wouldn't really bat an eye if you wanted to take them inside the back end of the 1st round. Whereas with Caden McDonald, I do see him as more of an early 2nd round guy. You're splitting hairs at that point, but there is a little bit of a split in terms of the value and overall kind of upside and quality of the player. That's not to say, though, that I don't like Caden McDonald, and he can't do a lot of the same things that we just described with Lee Hunter. I mean, if you need to get to 3rd downs, Caden McDonald is going to be your guy, and in this case, a great plan B if you don't get Lee Hunter. But the reason I do have Lee Hunter higher, I mentioned he's a little bit more of a playmaker against the run, and I think Lee Hunter gives you even a little bit more as a pass rusher, which is saying something. I think Lee Hunter, with that play strength and a little bit better feet, can get on top of you and compress the pocket a little bit more urgently than Caden McDonald, whereas Caden McDonald, it's like, all right, if you're out there, he's basically going to stand up and then try to walk you backwards. And by the time he's impacting the quarterback, it's going to be about 3 seconds into the play. He can do that because he's got the wicked strength and good leg drive to do that. It just takes a lot longer with Caden McDonald. And in reality, you're probably going to be taking McDonald off the field for the vast majority of your plays for third down. Whereas I think Lee Hunter can be out there as your fourth if need be. I think you're another step down from a pass rushing perspective with Caden McDonald. Now, as a run defender, both these guys are awesome and day one starting nose tackles in the NFL for first and second down. And I think Caden McDonald does it in a little bit more of what would be considered the traditional sense. He's even more compact. He's slightly heavier. His frame is more equally distributed. He's got the full sand in his pants to just sit there against a double team and say, I'm not moving. I think Lee Hunter, the right combo block can knock him back a little bit because of those lighter calves. Caden McDonald's going to be harder to move from a true double team, two gapping perspective. And he also has, I wouldn't say quite as amazing play strength, but excellent play strength to stack those hands inside, command a one-on-one block if he gets it, do your classic stack, peek, shed technique. It's all in there. I would say with Caden McDonald, though, he's younger. He's played 2 years less of college football than Lee Hunter. And I do think it shows in kind of the consistency with his technique. And I know we're comparing these two guys a lot, but there's a reason for that. These guys are going to go in a very similar range of the draft, and they give you something very similar. So I think it's totally fair to compare Lee Hunter and McDonald kind of back to back like this. But there's a lot more plays with Caden McDonald where he kind of cheats his technique a little bit. The pads come up. He maybe tries to out-athlete guys, kind of walks himself out of the play a little bit more. It doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen. In a way with Lee Hunter, it's like he has no mistake, ifs, ands, or buts about what he's there to do, how he's supposed to do it. He's going to stick his neck in there with the right technique every single time. McDonald, I think you're just trying to get 100% consistency with just playing with that proper gap discipline, low pad level, block take on technique, because that's what he is. We don't need Caden McDonald to do what Peter Woods does or what Caleb Banks does and try to like dodge blocks and out athlete offensive linemen and make these splash plays. Like, we're going to put the right players around you, Caden McDonald, to do that. We need you down there, fortifying the line of scrimmage. And again, he does that very well. It's just there's maybe 3 or 4 plays a game where he kind of gets bored with it a little bit and tries to do something else. And it's just like, we don't need you to do that. So if there was a knock on him as a run defender, that was probably it. And he just doesn't have quite the quick feet to be more of a disruptive, rangy player that like Lee Hunter can do at times. But McDonald has one of the most defined range of outcomes of any player on this list and any player in this draft. If you need a 2-gapping, 2-down nose tackle, this is your guy. It just comes down to like how much do you value that guy from a draft slot perspective. For me, I don't think you need to spend a first round pick on that. Probably more of like the 40th pick. Again, nitpicking, but these types of conversations I think do matter. My pro comp for him is Devon Godshaw, who's been a very sound, no-nonsense nose tackle for 10 years now. And I think if Caden McDonald can be that with the 40th pick in the draft, that's a perfectly good use if that's what you need for your defense. I just don't know that he's going to be too much more than that either. And then we have my number 6, defensive tackle, who this is actually another tie. He has the same grade as Caden McDonald, but my number 5B / number 6 DT, and that's Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. I was very pleasantly surprised with Darrell Jackson because I haven't really heard too many people talking about him, and definitely ended up with a top 50 grade on him as well. And I think he offers certainly more pass rushing than our last 2 guys. Good run defense, not on the same plane of existence as our last 2 guys, who are pretty special run defending prospects, but a very balanced prospect across the board that has some really high-end plays on tape and can certainly kind of put everything together, get rid of some of the lapses in his technique in both phases as a pass rusher and as a run defender, and really turn into like a highly complete, maybe even DT1 for you My pro comp on Darrell Jackson is Daquan Jones, which is an interesting pro comp because I think Bills fans might see a very similar player here in Darrell Jackson. But Daquan Jones didn't like really break out until he was like 30 years old. So if Darrell Jackson can be that at 24, 25 years old, he might end up being a much more reputable player that's a really legit kind of low-end DT1 type of guy. But let's get into him a little bit more in depth. The size, 6'5", 315 pounds, really great length, 34 3/4 inch arms. So that's impressive size. The thing is that there's actually not that many 6'5" and above defensive tackles in the league. They do exist, but you have to know how that can hurt you at times and how to develop your game around it. And I think Darrell Jackson's still figuring that all out because there's definitely times, especially as a run defender, where the pad level can work against him. He gets, plays too tall. Guys can get under his pads, drive him back. You'll see that C grade on his anchor. I think he's going to be an inconsistent run defender until he can really consistently keep those pads down and maybe even fill out his frame a little bit more. I think he's got a little bit more room to maybe get up to 320, 325. But he is a physically imposing guy. He walks up to the line of scrimmage and he's got that kind of first man off the bus look about him. And it kind of alludes to a lot of his upside because his athleticism's good. He's really strong. Like for a guy with long arms, they're filled out and they pack a punch and they are effective in whatever he wants to do, whether it's the bull rush or taking on blocks where when he throws those hands inside and he keeps his pads down, he can deconstruct the block, throw you to the side and have enough athleticism to make an athletic tackle and just engulf these running backs in the backfield. It's there, man. Again, consistency you want to see ramped up with him, but man, if you can get that on a play-to-play basis, you are absolutely in business with him. And then as a pass rusher, kind of the same deal. You string together his list of pressures and a highlight reel on him, and it's man, he can get off the ball. He can absolutely detonate dudes with a bull rush. He'll get to a long arm move where he's got you with that the length of almost 35-inch arms with strength, good enough feet. He can command you, and then he can just do whatever he wants with the second hand. He's got a swim move. He can even rip through you. It's just, that's all in flashes. He only finished with 14 pressures in his final season. That's the same number, ironically, that Peter Woods finished with as well. And just like Peter Woods, if you actually go back to 2024, Darrell Jackson did have a much better overall season. So, the tape and moments of production are there with Jackson. It's just putting the whole plan together, stemming moves together, being more accurate with his hands and efficient with these moves to be a more dominant pass rusher. It's close, man. I don't think this is some super raw project that's never going to work. I think you can put him out there as a rotational piece immediately, let him work on his craft, get him with the right coaching. He can be a legit dude for you. So I like him inside the top 50, a lot of balance to his profile. Not someone a ton of people are talking about, but there's a lot of exciting moments in his tape. And then we definitely have a fall off in sort of the tiering of these guys. Like I mentioned, those top 6 were all top 50 grades. I think all 6 of those can be impact starters within the roles you want them to be. Now we're getting into guys that are more developmental, further away from being starters or impact players within their roles, and into the third round. So we go from top 50 grades to true third round grades here. So if you're, doing your mock drafts and stuff, looking for DTs, maybe something to note if you're following how I view this class, it's kind of a gap from 50 to 65, where there's maybe not so many guys there unless someone we've already talked about is falling to you. But my next player here is my number 7, defensive tackle, Big Citrus, Dominique Orange out of Iowa State. Already a fun starting point with an elite nickname of Big Citrus, but a fun player as well to watch. because he's 6'2", 320 pounds, an absolute boulder of a human. He's got wicked play strength, outstandingly strong arms, a loaded base. And he basically plays every snap the same. He is going to come off the ball, fire his hands inside, and try to move you backwards. And he's pretty good at doing that. Like, he's really good at doing that. And against his college competition, it was pretty easy for him to just do that. Say, I'm coming in lower than you, I'm stronger than you, I know what I am as a player, and everyone else around me is just going to have to maximize on the disruption that I'm able to create. So that would happen as a run defender, and it would happen as a pass rusher. And I think from a pass rushing perspective, I like his style a lot more. Like, he's not this great athlete. I'm not drafting Dominique Orange to come out and have a massive bag of tricks and be this highly efficient pass rusher. Actually, if it's third down and we've got a nice dime package and I just need someone to kind of blow up the middle of the offensive line and create that steady push so that 2 seconds into the play, the quarterback has nowhere to step up into, I think that's actually probably the most translatable part of Dominique Orange's game today that you can use. It's limited. It's kind of a one-trick pony type of skill set for pass rushing work, but I know what you're getting there. As a run defender, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult to explain, because if you're looking at the screen, you see the pass rushing grade's a C and the run defense is a C+. I guess the way I would explain that is I'm okay with Dominique Orange being a C pass rusher where I know exactly what he can do. I'm not okay with him being a C+ run defender. I think we need a lot more development with the run defense stuff if I'm drafting him to be a nose tackle so that I can trust him on a down-to-down basis with the run defense. So that explains the grading there a little bit more, if that makes sense. But he kind of has that same mentality that I described with his pass rushing as a run defender. You might be able to find some examples of him taking on blocks and shedding and doing what we need him to do much more consistently, but it's much fewer and further in between with his tape than compared to like Caden McDonald or Lee Hunter, for example. And Orange really just doesn't play with the style and technique that I think NFL teams will want him to do as a nose tackle. More often than not, he comes off the ball, he kind of lunges and gets a little top heavy. He puts his head above his skis and he leans into guys and he tries to be disruptive and he tries to knock his center or guard, whoever he's going against, back into the run. And sometimes he'll do that. And the running back will walk right into the ass of his guard. And you're like, dang, Dominique Orange, like, you are strong. Like, that is impressive. However, there's a lot of times where he's either, he's not looking at the run. His head is into the chest of his matchup, and he's not seeing those opportunities to, disengage, find the ball carrier. There's a lot of times where the run goes right past him because of that approach he has. And it also leads to he will drive himself out of his gap. There's not a whole lot of concern for like holding down his run lane. It's more of just trying to knock back the guy in front of him, and that can lead to any number of different results. But it also leads to him being very imbalanced and ending up on the ground a lot more than you want to see. I think a lot of good offensive linemen he faced, and he's going to get more of those if he keeps to play with this technique in the league, where you'll get those club moves, where if they'll catch you leaning, it just takes an athletic lineman to take a sidestep, club you down, and he's going to end up face first on the ground and out of the play entirely. So the technique is not what you want it to be as a run defender. It's impressive that he can do what he does, but he's also not athletic like let's say Caleb Banks, for example. If you want him to shoot a gap and just try to maul forward and disrupt the play in the backfield, he's got the crazy twitch and ability to do that consistently. Orange, it's just more of like, hey, try to drive your guy backwards with reckless abandon. And it's not super effective as a run defender. So it's all coachable for him. There's no doubt. You look at this guy, the anchor, the strength in his arms, he's got decent arm length for a 6'2", 320-pound guy. I don't want to just say like he stinks and he'll never be good, but I do think you got to kind of you kind of got to wipe the board clean with his run defense technique and kind of reboot it. He needs a system update, if you will. And if that can happen with the right coaching, then you're talking about, all right, he can be exactly what Caden McDonald is as this immovable force as an early down run defender, and he can actually kind of get off the ball and compress the pocket a little bit more. And that's why you'll see I actually have a higher upside grade on Dominique Orge than Caden McDonald by a slight margin. But he's just not there yet. He doesn't have nearly the technique that Caden McDonald has. So he's a very fun player. There's going to be a certain amount of hype around him just because people gravitate towards nose tackles in general. And then someone named Dominique Orange with the nickname Big Citrus, they're really in business to create a hype machine there. But he's just not there yet as a player. I see him as a third round guy, but he does bring something to the table that can be harder to find. And I do like him as a player. I think he's more often than not kind of mocked in the second round, and I just think you might be disappointed for a year or two if you take him that early, where he's a little bit more of a project than what you typically would get with a second round type of guy. But I like him. It's my DT7. Let's go to number 8, and this is going to be Grayson Holton, who again, there's a tie there with my upcoming number 9 player, but my number 8/8A, Grayson Holton, out of Oklahoma. And his evaluation is pretty straightforward, to be honest. He's an athlete, a ballistic missile off the line of scrimmage. He ran a 4.8 240, 170 10-yard split, 36.5-inch vertical jump, like insane explosiveness, the speed, the get off, the immediate penetration ability that he has is an obvious disruptive force if put in the right position for a defensive line. And that speed and get off and that north and south explosiveness also gives him really good moments with his bull rush, where I think he can certainly become more consistent at sticking his hands, timing his punches and his get off all together to be a really good bull rusher. Like right now, he's more of a splash play bull rusher, but I see a lot of potential there to get ultra consistent with that and be a really nice kind of foundational piece of who he is. And then it also really helps him cross guys' face with a swim move. He's undoubtedly going to be a weapon for pass rush games, for stunts and loops and blitzes, you name it, where you can line him up a gap away and still have him threaten a different gap within a couple steps and just really stress offensive lines that way. So there's a value to what he can do. The main holdups with him are just that he's not fully refined as a pass rusher yet. Like I said, like he wins with the flashes with the power and the easy access from his athleticism. But if he can really develop more of a pass rush plan and be more of a guy that he's going to line up against the same guy 20 times in the same game and start to stem different moves together and be more of that consistent presence throughout the game, he's just not there from a technique standpoint as a pass rusher quite yet, but it's all in there to be developed. And then he's just not a run defender. Like, that's just not what you're drafting Grayson Holton to be. He's undersized. He's got 31-inch arms. Like, the anchor's bad. He's not going to kind of command blocks. He's going to miss with his strikes. And by the way, that does hurt his bull rush consistency that we talked about. He's just not consistently able to stick those hands, but especially as a run defender, it hurts him. And I also just, generally speaking, don't think he's a nasty, instinctive run defender either in terms of reading out the run and knowing how things are coming at him. So, like, he really can't play on early downs for now. Maybe in the right system as a 4-eye and a penetrator where you can leverage that first step, for your base 3-4s and as a slanter in certain systems, like you can carve a role for him until he maybe gets better, but I just don't think he's ever going to be that good of a run defender. I don't, but maybe you can kind of hide him from the scheme and then turn him into a really good pass rusher someday. It's possible. Maybe not necessarily likely, but possible. I comped him to another crazy athlete that came out of Oklahoma, was undrafted, and he put in the time and got into a system with Brian Flores that was able to really weaponize his twitch within the structure of their fronts to make him a functional run defender, and then really get after the quarterback. And that's Jalen Redmond. A lot of similarities there with Gracen Halton. And honestly, if Gracen Halton, I keep saying Holton, it's Halton. If he goes in the third round, honestly, he might have to cut a check to Jalen Redmond, because that same school, very similar prospect, Jalen Redmond, went undrafted. I don't think their tape is terribly dissimilar. If Halton comes out of this program and goes in the third round, he might want to send a little gift package to Jalen Redmond, a little thank you letter, and maybe they end up as teammates with Brian Flores wanting another one here. But you really do get a handful of guys like Gracen Halton every year that are really great athletes at the position that are still kind of trying to figure everything out. And that's what I saw with him. I think you can draft him in the third round, because I know I'm kind of talking down on the guy. I think this profile more often than not doesn't work out just because of the lack of the play strength. But there's explosive moments there. There are times and games where there's an it factor with him impacting the passing game. So I think as the third round goes along, if you believe in your coaching staff and the scheme fit, you can find a place for him to help your defense now while he hopefully develops. So there's Gracen Halton. And then we have my number 9 D tackle, and that's Chris McClellan out of Mizzou. Another guy I was pleasantly surprised by, especially as a pass rusher. But you load up the tape, you watch the first snap, and he is one of these looks the part defensive tackles. He's 6'4", 313 pounds. He looks big and strong, 34-inch arms. And you see the way he moves, you're like, that's a pretty damn nice, dare I say, special athlete for a guy that's like a full-size NFL DT. The one holdup with him that I really felt the more and more I watched is that I didn't think his play strength really matched what the eye showed you at first. He looks like he should be powerful, but he's just not. He's not a good run defender. He doesn't anchor well. When he strikes with his hands, they're not strong punches. I feel like he could punch harder with what his frame is, but he just doesn't. He doesn't displace guys in the run game. He gets driven back. There's nothing really special about his diagnostics or discipline. He's not even that great at like constantly penetrating with his athleticism either. I think he's a rotational, low end of the rotation run defender out the gate. The tools are in there to get better, but your D-line coach is going to have his hands full, like kind of working on run defense from the ground up with Chris McClellan, and that might just never come along. It just might not be something that he's all that instinctive with, or maybe he doesn't have the right mindset. He's not physical enough to get nasty in the trenches. That could just be the case. However, as a pass rusher, I see a lot of upside with Chris McClellan. Not quite the like shot out of a cannon, incredible burst of like Halton, who we just talked about, but considering he's a full-size guy, his ability to run down the quarterback, to get off the ball, the lateral agility to attack the half man, it's all in there. And you do see some really good foundations of exciting pass rushing with McClellan, especially when you talk about that agility. I mean, his ability to kind of set you up, do a little, jab step, Euro step type deal where he makes you think you're going right, and then he hits you to the left with a rip move, or he'll swim across the opposite side. He's got a really nice foundation with that alone. What gets exciting is like there's flashes of the power in there, and that's where it's kind of frustrating with him, because it's like, dude, I see the frame, I see the athleticism, you got the length. Like, you've got these guys guessing, freaking drive into him and detonate this block, and he just doesn't do it often enough. But again, if the D-line coach can pair an already kind of rare foundation with his finesse skill set, not a lot of guys understand swim moves and rip moves and how to set guys up like that. That's the hard part. Now let's get him to frickin' notice that the lineman is sitting there on his heels guessing which direction you're coming from. You could take those 34-inch arms and take him for a ride. That's where the exciting potential of Chris McClellan comes in. He just doesn't do it enough. And sometimes when he does try to do it, again, it comes back to the play strength. It's like, it's not horrible, but it could be better. And a lot of times I'll go to the bull rush and it doesn't quite connect. The hands come in a little bit soft. He doesn't quite get that knockback power, or he doesn't keep running his legs with his hands. Like, there's still a lot to come along with him, but with the right coaching, honestly, a player I think he is built like and moves like and has the potential to be kind of similar to is Keanu Benton for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who ended up going pretty high in the draft. And he's been a very good, kind of underrated pass rusher in the league. Likewise, though, kind of not as good of a run defender as a lot of people thought he would be coming out. The Steelers, for some reason, have kind of stuck him at nose tackle and kept him there, and he's been a pretty big liability against the run. But some other guys like a Nathan Shepard, I see a lot of that with Chris McClellan, who's quietly on like a 3-year, $20-something million deal right now. Like, he's been a very nice kind of third pass rushing piece for NFL defensive linemen. Sometimes a kind of, number 2 DT, number 4 on your D line. Like, he's an underrated player too. I think McClellan can be something like that. Does the run defense ever come along? That's probably a bigger question mark, but very interesting player. I've got a true third-round grade on him as well. I'm kind of talking myself into, honestly, liking him more than Grayson Halton, to be honest. Obviously, like, the grades are the same, so it's already extremely tight. We'll leave it as such for this video, but I might end up flipping that by the time we get to draft day. Ultimately, though, there's a reason these guys are neck and neck. I think they're third-round guys that can get after the quarterback, but pretty shady projections as run defenders. And then we have my number 10, defensive tackle, and this is Rayshaun Benny out of Michigan. Kind of a tough player to get a read on here with Benny, to be honest. There's a lot of moments where I like what I see on tape and I want to believe in him and his projection to the next level, and then there's a lot of inconsistencies and aspects of his overall portfolio where I don't know with him. But for me, this is a late third, early fourth round type of prospect, someone that I think can get involved in your rotation right away. And then if some of the consistency can ramp up, maybe we could talk about a guy that has traits to be a starter someday. So I'll try to drive the ship here as we talk about Rayshaun Benny, but it's really just kind of a rocking boat, a lot of back and forth, some good, some bad with him. But he's 6'3", 298 pounds, which is, by a listed weight, really light. I was surprised when I saw that he was 298 pounds, though, because I think you watch him on film and it's like, I don't know, man, he's kind of filled out. Like, I think he passes the eye test from a play strength perspective. I didn't think his anchor was horrible. I didn't think he was a dominant, like, hold the line type of defensive tackle. Like, yeah, he would get driven back against double teams and stuff, but I don't think he necessarily needs to bulk up. Like, there's effective defensive tackles that play around 6'3", 300. I think Benny can stay there, and he's not going to be the most physically imposing guy, but it does give him access to, like, pretty good feet and get off and athleticism. Like, I think he's got a nice, balanced, overall athletic NFL kind of frame and physical profile. Arm length's pretty solid, 33.5 inches. So I think he checks all the boxes you want from kind of a nice high floor NFL type of body and athlete. And then you get into kind of the technique and the tape, and from a pass rushing perspective, it's frustrating because there's just not a lot of evidence with him. Kind of a total projection. And this is where I go straight back to anybody that remembers Chris Jenkins coming out of Michigan. It doesn't feel like a lot has changed. I did 3 games on Rayshaun Benny. I felt like there was like 10 snaps where I got an actual opportunity to watch him just beat a guy one-on-one. For some reason, in that program, and I do think a lot of offenses are trying to get the ball out quickly against this D-line that's been so good for a long time. But he just doesn't get those opportunities. He's either coming off the field or a part of like this massive rotation of highly recruited guys, or they're asking him to be a looper and a stunter and do stuff that's effective at times, but not going to give you a good sense of like, how consistent is his bull rush? What types of pass rush moves does he have? His pass rushing projection is exactly that. It's a projection. we don't know much. Really all I observed was some good moments with a good first step and an effective bull rush. Not nearly consistent enough, but it's in there. And one time I saw him break out a really nice club swim move where I'm like, hey, good to know you got some technique in there. But we're talking about 18 pressures overall from his final season on 268 pass rush snaps. That's not crazy production. And again, a lot of that did come on loops and stunts and pass rush games where he's got the athleticism to do that kind of stuff. But everything is in flashes with him as a pass rusher. And then I thought his run defense stuff was kind of frustrating to watch because I do think the good technique is in there. There's all of the moments that you look to see from a Michigan defensive lineman where he keeps the pads down and stacks his block and has the run, technique and diagnostics to find the ball, get off blocks, contain your gap, that kind of stuff. But then the next play, he's either, playing with bad posture where his head gets over his skis and he ends up on the ground, or he lifts his pads up and walks himself out of the play and tries to out-athlete the offensive line. And the run defense tape was, again, just all over the map. So I think he has the tools to be, at worst, like a really good first man off the bench that can do a little bit of everything for you. And that's got a lot of value as a late third or early fourth round pick. We don't need to find a starter with every one of these draft picks, but I do think he looks the part to have enough to maybe be a starter for you someday if he can continue to develop at the next level. Just kind of a guy where I didn't have any major knocks on him. I just didn't see anything consistently enough to get overly excited about him either. Just kind of a balanced, okay profile reinforced with some pretty good traits for the position where we're just going to have to kind of see where this goes. But there's my top 10 list there. Again, there's some other interesting names in this draft. In fact, all the way down to my number 16 defensive tackle, I have 4th to 5th round grades on the next 6 players. So there is a lot more depth in this draft that we're not going to talk about here today. But if you want to get access to my full write-ups and see what I think about these guys, I've got 21 defensive tackles done to date with plans to have 31 done by draft day. So you can find that on my Patreon at my draft guide. That's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy, along with all of the other players I've written up to this point. Support my channel in the process and get exclusive content. Things like my 7-round mock drafts will be in the weeks leading up to the draft. And you can also get access to my Studs and Duds series there. If you are a fan of my Studs and Duds series, my player performance review series for the NFL, and you're wondering where that's been, that made the move to exclusive content here for the channel. So you get that over on Patreon or by becoming a member here on YouTube. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of my top 10 list, where you think I'm right, where you think I'm wrong, who do you think got snubbed from this list as well. Let's hear it all in the comments down below. Please do hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and until next time, thank you for watching. Cheers.